Let's talk about what cancer is, how it starts, and how fearing and fighting cancer can make us sicker. I also want to show why conventional cancer treatment often does help people to heal. This episode is about the science of cancer, which is very different from the technological medical model. Nature makes no mistakes. God does not play dice. Instead, all of creation springs forth according to a few simple, elegant rules. All of creation, including your body. Know these rules and your body comes under your control. Welcome to Mind Over Symptom, where the pattern is revealed. So what exactly is cancer? Cancer is when cells in any part of your body reproduce at a faster rate than they die off, which results in a greater amount of excess tissue. And why does cancer happen? Cells increase in number by making exact copies of themselves. Cells decrease in number by dying off. Now, the medical view says that cancer cells do not die when they're supposed to, and that's what cancer is. According to the U.S. National Cancer Institute, something happens to normal cells so that they won't die off, and they basically become little zombies. There are dozens of these kinds of ideas about how and why this happens, but I'm going to address just the 5 main ones, which are the ideas of malignancy, toxicity, genetic damage, carcinogenesis, and metastasis. First, malignancy. Medical technologists believe that cancer cells are malignant, which means evil, and this is the reason we've got to fight cancer. Second, there's the idea of toxicity. Medical technologists believe that cancer cells are toxic, which means poisonous. In this understanding, cancer makes you feel bad because your cancer cells are emitting poison. And why does a good cell turn bad and become toxic? Well, it must be because the genes inside the cells go bad, which leads me to the third idea, genetic damage. Inside the nucleus of every cell are the chromosomes, which are made up of genes. Genes are tiny little bits of molecular code, also known as DNA. And if the genes control the cell's behavior, a bad cell must be bad because its genes are telling it to be bad. So how do these genetic changes occur that create bad genes? There are 2 possibilities. The first is that you were born with a bad gene and at some point it just flipped on like a switch. But the other possibility is carcinogenesis, the 4th idea I want to talk about. So the other possible way that your genes might turn bad is because of carcinogens, which by definition are things that make cancer start. And these things that allegedly make cancer start are everywhere. They're in nature, in your medicine, your workplace, your house, the air, water, and food that you consume. And the assumption is carcinogens make cancer start by getting into the genetic control center of a cell and altering one or more of the genes in that cell. And since carcinogens are everywhere, they would probably actually affect more than just one gene or one cell. The 5th idea is metastasis. Metastasis is a really, really scary medical idea. It means to move from one location to another. So in this view, a cancer cell in one part of your body can break loose and travel to another part of your body where it'll start a new cancer there. And this is the reason we've got to catch cancer early. So I'd like to point out that the idea of bad things happening to us or to ourselves or to our genes to make us sick is really a very, very old idea that the scientific process has shown over and over again to be false. What do I mean by scientific process? I mean, these ideas about cancer have been tested, and as it turns out, they're not true all the time. In fact, these ideas aren't even true the majority of the time. I'll show you what I mean. Let's start with the idea of carcinogenesis to process this idea scientifically. So what we have to do is we have to turn it into a testable premise, a hypothesis, and that means that we state it as though it's a fact, and then we check to see if we're right. If it isn't a fact, if it isn't true every single time, then scientifically speaking, it's false. and our hypothesis fails. And this is how we test things scientifically, and whatever remains standing is what we can continue to believe is true until we test that. So here we go. Some science going to happen here. I put forward the hypothesis that carcinogens cause cancer. So now let's test my hypothesis. There are around 400 million people in North America. All of us are exposed to carcinogens for our entire lives, even from before we're born. Do all of us get cancer? No. About a third of us are expected to get cancer in our lifetimes, to be diagnosed with it. So carcinogens do not cause cancer every single time. Therefore, it's not true that carcinogens cause cancer. It's as simple as that, scientifically. How about getting a little more specific? Let's test the hypothesis that tobacco smoke causes lung cancer. But here's a problem. Many lung cancer patients weren't smokers, and yet they developed lung cancer anyway. So for this reason alone, my hypothesis fails, and therefore tobacco smoke is not a cause of lung cancer. Next, only 10% of smokers are actually diagnosed with lung cancer. So this means that 90% of smokers don't get a lung cancer diagnosis. So my hypothesis fails again, and smoking isn't the cause of lung cancer. Now, it is true that 10 times more smokers than non-smokers get diagnosed with lung cancer, so that seems to support the idea, and this is actually how most medical logic actually works. It's not science, it's based in statistics. But that's a logical fallacy, specifically the false cause fallacy, also called in Latin, cum hoc ergo propter hoc. What it means is with this, therefore because of this. And it's a logical fallacy. It's wrong thinking. It's like saying there are 10 times more blue-eyed blondes in Sweden than there are in Italy. Therefore, if an Italian moves to Sweden, that's going to cause her hair to turn blonde and her eyes to turn blue. So carcinogenesis is out the window because of the tiniest bit of scientific testing, and so is about half the foundation of modern oncology. With just a little bit of actual science, we disprove the idea that cancer is caused by carcinogens. Using the same scientific thinking, cancer isn't inherited. If it was, identical twins would always get the same cancer at about the same time. A metastasis can't take place in the way that we've come to believe. If it did, cancer would always spread the same way at the same stage, and at least once or twice, researchers would have been able to see cancer cells floating around in the interstitial fluid or in the arterial blood flow or the lymph tissue in order to spread the cancer from one body system to another. But this has never been observed. And thank goodness, because if metastasis was real, people would get cancer from blood transfusions, from sharing body fluids, and they don't. Cancer is not transmissible. The foundation of the technological model of cancer is that our genes control our cells, and therefore a cancer cell is the result of cancer in the genes themselves. How can we scientifically test how this occurs? Well, starting about 4 decades ago, studies were done to find out. And what researchers did was they removed the entire cell nucleus to see how the cell's behavior would change because of the loss of the genetic control system. Guess what happens to a cell when you remove its genetic material? Ready for it? Absolutely nothing. If you remove all or even some of the genetic material, the cell goes right on absorbing nutrients, excreting waste, doing whatever its job is. Its life continues unaffected. The only thing that changes is the cell can't duplicate itself. Otherwise, the cell isn't bothered in the slightest if its DNA is removed. Now, the genetic material in your cells is therefore not controlling your cells. Instead, your genetic material is just a photocopy machine for your cell. It's how your cells duplicate themselves in order to produce more cells of the same kind. All of this adds up to the genetic material in the center of your cell isn't a control center, it's a copy center. So why then do cells decide to change the rate at which they reproduce and then reproduce so fast that the tissue builds up into a cancer tumor? The answer is not in the center of the cell at all. It's in the cell's membrane. Every cell in your body responds to its chemical, electrical, and hormonal environment by picking up signals from the environment through the cell's membrane. Based on those signals, the cells either have to do more of what they're supposed to do or less of what they're supposed to do. And they do this by either increasing or decreasing in number. Just like a company's going to meet a higher demand by hiring more employees. What we've come to call cancer is a completely natural process in a specific location of your body that needs to do more of what it normally does. The origin of every symptom, even cancer, is a biological conflict in your psyche. I find it fascinating that medicine believes that your body's behavior comes from a control in the center of the cell. But medical science can't believe that your body's behavior is controlled from the center of your mind. It's the same idea, but the insistence is that it's in the physical and not in the non-physical. This is the rift. But it really is coming from your psyche. Your brain and nervous system mediate the demand created by the biological conflict in your psyche. And that demand is met when the brain and nervous system send signals to the appropriate tissue or system in your body, telling it to change its function in order to help solve the biological conflict in the psyche. And how does it change its function? In the case of cancer, it changes its function by producing more of itself. So more colon tissue is going to digest more. Right? More lung tissue is going to absorb more oxygen. Cancer is always for a specific reason, and that reason is that your body must respond to the biological conflict in your psyche. Even so-called metastatic cancers are a response to biological conflicts in the psyche. Accidental medical harm becomes a serious issue for cancer patients because the shock of a frightening diagnosis or a bad prognosis in itself can be a reason to create a new biological conflict in the psyche. And many cancer treatments are really, really stressful, and we will start new biological conflicts in our psyche about that. This is the real cause of cancer metastasis, and it's why fighting cancer can actually cause serious harm to your health. It's because we're trying to fight against a fight against a fight. Medical treatment for cancer rests on the belief that cancer cells are different from normal cells, but in fact, researchers have never been able to find anything different about cancer cells other than the fact that they reproduce faster than they die off. So, an ovarian cancer cell isn't different from a normal ovarian cell, except that it's duplicating quickly. The reason researchers have never been able to find anything different about cancer cells is that there aren't normal cells and cancer cells. There are just normal cells. There are 4 different broad types of normal cells in your body, regulated electrochemically and biochemically from 4 different regions of your brain. When you create a biological conflict in your psyche, your brain's going to relay biochemical signals to your body. And whichever part of your body is responsible for that particular type of biological conflict is going to be the part of your body that responds. Now, here's the part that your doctor probably doesn't know. As soon as you resolve that biological conflict in your psyche, the process will reverse and go into healing. Yes, that's all there is to it. Cancer heals itself by you solving the biological conflict in your psyche. When the biological conflict is resolved and the healing phase is complete, cancer will immediately stop growing. Cancer is your body's natural response to an active conflict in one of the 2 older germ layers of your body, or cancer is your body's natural response to a resolved biological conflict in one of the 2 younger germ layers of your body. So there's 2 broad types of cancer. Your brain is just turning the voltage up or down to the appropriate area of your body in order to produce more tissues or less tissues, according to what will best help you to resolve a conflict and avoid experiencing that type of conflict anymore in the future. It's part of how you evolve. So the key to healing cancer is to understand that if you have an active conflict cancer, you must resolve your conflict, the biological conflict in your psyche. Nobody else can resolve that for you. It's your psyche. You are making that conflict in your non-conscious mind. If you have a healing phase cancer, you've already resolved the conflict. Now what you must do is complete your healing as gently and quickly as you can, which means basically not getting yourself all stressed out and creating new conflicts. That's the key. Incidentally, healing phase cancers won't stop growing until the brain has completed the healing phase process. But active conflict cancers will immediately stop growing at the moment that you resolve the biological conflict in your psyche. And if you've got the necessary microbes, that cancer will begin breaking down and flushing out of your system with the help of those microbes, if they're available. Otherwise, it just has to sort of slowly indurate and calcify and wear, slough off. So the way to heal cancer is not to fight against the body. It's to resolve conflicts in your psyche and support your body. I can't scientifically disprove the idea that cancer is evil or malignant, but I personally believe that superstition has no place in a medical office, and I don't think the laws of nature could work if they were based on evil. But that's just my personal opinion. What I do know as a scientist is that cancer is your body's natural and appropriate response to biological conflict each and every time it happens, even so-called metastatic cancer. It is unfortunately true that one cancer diagnosis tends to lead to another, but the reason is that a frightening diagnosis or a poor response to medical treatment can lead to all sorts of new and intense biological conflicts in our psyches. That's why it's really helpful to understand how this works, so that when these things happen, we can be trusting our bodies and not afraid of them. It can mean the difference between life and death, really. However, life-saving anatomical intervention can be helpful and totally appropriate. Prolonged conflict could exhaust you, and medical support could help with that, help you to not get exhausted. Tumors can block off vital ductwork in your body. Medical intervention can be life-saving if they unblock. A healing phase cancer can be intensely painful. Medical intervention can ease that. A medical treatment can also give you personal support and focus and incentive, can scare you into making important lifestyle changes. These are good things. Medical technology can be a vital part of supporting your healing. I hope I've helped you to understand that cancer has a real purpose and it's not your body or nature gone crazy. But if you'd like to learn exactly how the 5 biological laws of the Germanische Heilkunde help us to overcome cancer and live long, healthy lives, check out my Answers to Cancer course at the Mindtree Health website. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Mind Over Symptom. To make sure you don't miss an episode, subscribe now and please share with a loved one. The Mind Over Symptom blog lives at mindtreehealth.net, where you can get your free training about the natural laws of healing, and you can also get support. I'm Lishwi Springford, your guide for radical self-healing.